This is PTV World. I am Syed Shabahat Ali and you are watching Fault Lines. The relationship between United States and Pakistan has always been on a roller coaster ride. And at the moment, when Biden administration and the Prime Minister of Pakistan are apparently on two different poles, it is very important for Pakistan to understand what exactly United States is thinking about Pakistan's position in the current dynamics of this region. We have today taken an appointment for interview with Pakistan's ambassador in Washington, D.C., Dr. Asad Majid Khan, to exclusively speak with PTV World about the diplomatic relationship between Pakistan and USA. Join this conversation with us today. So there is a belief that the relationship between Pakistan and United States is deteriorating. It is not as good as it used to be in the past, where we were strategic allies. Do you agree with the statement, or you have a different opinion?
I think what is important for us to see is that what is the point in time in our relationships history that you are alluding to. Of course, there was a time when Pakistan was most allied of the allies, and we were probably the only country in the world that was simultaneously the member of both SEATO and CENTO. And there were times when, we facilitated United States also by providing, bases as well. But things have moved on, and the relationship and the content of the relationship has also changed, and perhaps that is creating that perception. But I would say that on both sides there is greater realism in terms of what to expect from the relationship. I would not describe this as a downgrade, but I would say that there is greater realism between the two countries and the diplomatic establishments of the two countries in terms of what we can do and what we cannot do in the bilateral relationship.
So this relationship between the United States and Pakistan that we are talking about took a major shift, and I hope you agree with me on that, after 9/11, when Pakistan stood out and extended all-out support. And then Pakistan took the brunt of United States invasion of Afghanistan. We became the country with maximum war casualties as an effort of United States carried out. Do you think this role has been acknowledged, or Pakistan's sacrifices have been acknowledged to the extent as we expected?
Again, let me come back to your previous question and elaborate on that a little bit more, because I think it's very important to read the relationship right. It is very important to make an accurate assessment of where we are in this relationship. Now, there is a security dimension to the relationship, and then there is also an economic and so-called non-security dimension of the relationship. Today, United States is still the largest single country export destination for Pakistan. That has not changed. Today, United States is still the third or the fourth largest remittance provider to Pakistan. United States has all along been one of the top 5 investing countries in Pakistan. And then last but not the least, the United States is also home to over 1 million Pakistani American diaspora, which I think in terms of its influence, in terms of its integration, in terms of their level of education and professionalism, I think is unique for any country in the world. So these are the other dimensions of the relationship where I think absolutely nothing has changed. Now, Afghanistan has been a point of contention, and the war on the so-called war on terror and the perceptions on the role that Pakistan played during that struggle is basically there is no one view on that. But I can also tell you that as we speak, there definitely is a very clear recognition and much greater appreciation of what we have done to support the peace process, and then linked to that is also the recognition that what we have sacrificed and the contributions that we have made in blood and treasure to fight a war which was obviously brought to the region not because of actions originating from Pakistan, but we definitely suffered the most. So that recognition, I would say, is definitely there.
But despite all what you said, the American leadership, the current leadership at the moment, there has not been any talk between the two heads of the states. Senator John Kerry did not visit Pakistan during his recent visit. And major people in the American politics have not been very actively appreciating Pakistan's role, because Pakistan has played a very pivotal role in the current withdrawal of US forces as well. What do you believe would be the reasons for this ice between these two countries?
No, again, I think it's a question. Yes, you are right. I think there hasn't been a physical contact or an actual conversation between the Prime Minister of Pakistan and the President of the United States. But then they did exchange letters, and beyond the President, there have been a series of engagements. Foreign Minister has already spoken to his counterpart a couple of times. The national security advisors of the two countries have not just spoken to each other, but they have had quite a productive meeting in Geneva, which I'm sure you are aware of. And then, through the military channel, the military leadership of the United States has been continuously in touch with our military leadership. And General Austin has also been speaking to our leadership. So if I were to go back and look at the level of exchanges and interactions, only today, Victoria Nuland, who is the Undersecretary Political at the State Department, which is actually the Foreign Secretary in the US system, has just spoken to her counterpart in Islamabad and had a very productive and useful exchange. And quite a long one, actually. Similarly, Derek Chollet, who is the senior counselor, which is again at the level of Undersecretary of State, is someone who's been in touch with our leadership. And not just that, I would also like to draw your attention to another very important call that took place, and that was between the advisor on commerce and the USTR ambassador Catherine Tai. During President Trump's time, actually we haven't had any interaction between the USTR and our commerce minister. So for the USTR to be able to speak to our advisor on commerce during the first 2 months of our appointment, I think reflects the significance that they attach to building a strong economic and trade relationship with Pakistan. So on the whole, I would say that yes,
situation is not as bad
as that one
media.
call may not have. And I think even on that count also, Shabad, I can tell you that I think this administration has taken over in a very complex and unprecedented set of circumstances, for the election to be contested for any new coming administration, for an impeachment process to be continuing when they took over, then a raging pandemic hitting United States, I think has in many ways made that process of transition less than smooth, and then preoccupied the new administration, at least during the first few months. But obviously, they are going out and establishing contacts and connections consistent with the priorities that they have. So I think we'll see how it plays out. But in terms of engagements and in terms of various conversations taking place, a lot has already happened, and we expect more.
Ambassador, despite all what you said, and I really appreciate whatever things you have highlighted, but still there's a perception, and this perception is developing over a period of time. And the perception is that United States views Pakistan purely from the angle of Afghanistan, or the potential role of Pakistan, or the current role of Pakistan in the peacekeeping process or the peace process of Afghanistan. Would you agree with this statement that it has only been, the relationship has only been curtailed to the security prism or to the spectrum of Afghanistan? It has not gone beyond that.
I think that's a perception that is not too far off the mark, clearly, because Afghanistan is the primary and principal US preoccupation in the context of our region. So obviously, when you have your boots on the ground, you have been there in a country for 20 years, where at one point in time you had forces numbering more than 100,000, so you have invested a lot in terms of your both financial as well as human resources, and that clearly gets the attention, and that also then trumps everything else that could potentially happen between our two countries. It's like having a 1,000 watt bulb in the room, and as long as that bulb is on, even if you have 200 watt bulbs, you will not notice them until you switch off that big, the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And so Afghanistan, but historically we were friends before Afghanistan happened. We want to be friends with United States after United States walks out or withdraws from Afghanistan. And I think all our effort this past several years has been to basically turn that issue of contention into an issue of convergence. So what I can tell you today is that Afghanistan is really a point of convergence between our two countries. United States want an honorable withdrawal. United States want peace process to succeed. United States wishes to see reduction in violence. United States want to see a government in Afghanistan which is able to effectively govern, so that there are no ungoverned spaces which can be abused by perhaps terrorist groups in the future. And our priorities and our preferences are not any different from that. And that really, I think, has made the conversations easier. And I think Pakistan has also, in a way, addressed some of the concerns and has overcome some of the residual skepticism from the past in terms of working sincerely and completely to support the peace process. And I would say this is not really consistent with the positions that we have historically taken, because we had always argued that there is no military solution, and that a comprehensive, inclusive settlement is the only way forward. I think United States has come around to that position. Today they are more realistic in terms of understanding the limits of the use of force and the relevance and utility of trying the negotiation and dialogue track.
Ambassador, you just said, and let me repeat that, correct me if I'm wrong, that United States has now reached to the conclusion that Pakistan has been suggesting since day one of Afghan war. Is that right?
When I say now, I mean over the last few years, United States has come since the time that they got involved in negotiating peace with Taliban, in encouraging Afghan groups to settle it amongst themselves. Yes, they have come around to that reality.
Ladies and gentlemen, we take a break and we'll join you after the break once again. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, and we continue our conversation with Pakistan's ambassador in the United States. Ambassador, we were talking about Afghanistan a while ago, and here is a point that I would want you to discuss. Pakistan had great influence on the Taliban regime in early 90s, and when the United States decided to attack Afghanistan, Pakistan was a country that tried its level very best to avoid that or to bridge the gap between the two. But once this attack took place, Pakistan provided all-out support to the United States, which actually melted out the diplomatic capital that we had over Taliban. And with Taliban taking brunt of the war for the last 20 years, now United States wants Pakistan once again to capitalize on its influence on Taliban, to make Taliban agree what United States has not been able to make them agree to for the last 20 years. Do you think this is a sensible decision made by, or a sensible direction made by the US government? Because they are now solely relying, as we have seen, no other channels have been useful except for use of Pakistan. And I would want you to connect this to the recent statement by Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, who said that in case of a failure, Pakistan should not be blamed.
First of all, I think we have always maintained that our influence would go only up to a point. While we may have some influence, we certainly do not control Taliban, and there is ample evidence out there from Taliban's time also, which is covered by a number of memoirs that are available in the public space, where it comes out very clearly that Taliban were the masters of their own will, and they did what they wanted to do. And even in those days when their dependence on us was even more, our influence was limited. So I think I'd start with that at least opening clarification. And we've been very clear with our friends, with our American friends also. And that's why our role throughout has been basically to facilitate the peace process, to bring the Taliban to the negotiating table, to bring a credible, empowered delegation, because in the past there were episodes when those who were interested in negotiating were negotiating with people who were not really authorized or empowered by the Taliban leadership. So to the extent of negotiating the peace process, we have exercised whatever influence we could, but then we were not there in the room. What we did was that it is for United States and Taliban to decide on the elements that they can agree to. And we are happy that they were able to sign on to an agreement and get to an understanding. And I could say this, that I think thanks to that agreement, there is some reservoir of goodwill between Taliban and United States, that they have clearly moved from being adversaries to being interlocutors. which is, I think, a significant development. And then obviously even moving to the next stage where intra-Afghan negotiations, again we are not in the room. It is, and we have said it time and again, that we have no favorites. Let Taliban and the Afghan parties get to some common understanding, and whatever is acceptable to them will be acceptable to us.
So, Ambassador, based on whatever you just said, where do you think the relationship between Pakistan and United States will go forward from this point when United States is almost out of Afghanistan? It's only a matter of time. And the civil war on Afghanistan is probably the most probable scenario in the system. How do you believe Pakistan and the United States diplomatic relationship will now remain?
I think our number one concern and the topmost priority, the concern is the unraveling of the peace process, and the priority is to see the peace process succeed. And that's why we maintain that this is the time for every country that can contribute to come forward in support of the peace process. And all the Afghan parties should hear it, and hear it clearly from all the important countries in the region and the extended region on why they want the peace process to succeed. Because if the process stops and it unravels, then we have seen the consequences of that, and I think you are right. We can see and anticipate infighting between Afghan factions resulting in a civil war, and that could lead to consequences not just for Pakistan. I think it would lead to consequences for Iran, it would lead to consequences for China, for Russia, for Central Asia. And I think that's why all the countries of all the immediate neighbors of Afghanistan have come out very clearly, and even others who have been productively involved in support of the peace process, including China and Russia, have signed on to this extended Troika declaration, which actually reflect the broad regional consensus on peace process, and all countries have signed on to reduction in violence, all Afghan parties getting to a common understanding, and a government which is acceptable to everyone. And that provides, in my view, a very important basis for all of us to work, because and that's the message I think that all Afghan parties, both Taliban and the Ashraf Ghani government and other stakeholders in Afghanistan, should hear from
But Ambassador, my question was regarding the relationship between Pakistan and United States going forward in this entire scenario that you just mentioned.
Again, that's what I am saying, that because Afghanistan was a contention, and at least as we speak, Afghanistan is a convergence, and it is important that peace process succeeds, because if peace process is successful and United States withdraws in a way that it synchronizes with the progress in the peace process, then we will have that contention out of our way for us to have a relationship that can focus on other aspects. Because clearly, as I said to you in the beginning, that for us this is an important trade relationship, for us this is an important investment relationship, and the government is already speaking about shifting from geostrategic to geoeconomics. And so peace in Afghanistan would open up opportunities and possibilities for broader regional connectivity. Also, it will allow us to also focus on tapping optimally the economic opportunities, because really I think we already see the US corporate footprint getting bigger. I'm sure you have seen the reports of Amazon going into Pakistan and having started the seller registration process. Cargill, which is one of the largest agricultural product related company, has set up operations in Pakistan. Amazon is looking at other streams also, because this is just one of the many things that they do. They have back office support services, they have Amazon Web Service also, and then they also have their own brand. So all those conversations are going on.
So you see a convergence toward an economic partnership?
I think that should be a very important part of this relationship, and I think it is important to bring that much needed balance, because as you began, you kind of started looking at the relationship more from the security perspective. And the challenge with a security relationship, or perhaps the advantage in a security context relationship, is that you can manage and run that relationship through only a limited number of players. But when it comes to a more robust economic and trade relationship, that involves the entire country, that involves the way you produce, the way you work, your regulatory mechanisms, your property rights, your work ethics, all of that. And then that's the kind of conversation that I believe we should have, and that's the direction where we would like this relationship to go. And really, I think going into the past, agriculture has been a golden chapter in our relationship, and only if we could revive some of the old cooperation in terms of working with the US companies in enhancing our agricultural productivity, our dairy productivity, getting assistance and support in improving our irrigation and water management techniques, I tell you, our production would increase even as of now, with yields that are 30, 40, and in some cases 50% less than even the regional average. We are producing, and we are one of the largest, or top 5, top 3, top 4 producers of sugar cane, rice, cotton, milk, and all of that stuff. So if we were able to enhance our productivity, I tell you, I see a lot of potential. And then, look at where we are, I think, and this is not lost on the US companies, I can tell you that. ExxonMobil has gone in. The other major companies who've been there and had their presence in Pakistan for a long time, they would want to increase, because I think technology is the other area. And that's where the diaspora comes in. You go to the Silicon Valley, you would see Pakistani Americans who are doing very well, and they are very keen and interested in exploring opportunities in Pakistan. And technology, I have always maintained and believed, is the force multiplier and is the low hanging fruit in the relationship. So we can also concentrate on technology. Energy, we are like right in the middle of two of the largest energy consuming countries in the world, and we are also sandwiched between two energy hubs, Central Asia and the Middle East and Iran. So if we can leverage our regional connectivity potential the right way, we really can attract the US investments and use it to create win-wins that would help the US companies, that would help Pakistan.
Ambassador, Pakistan's increasing relationship with China and Pakistan's increasing cooperation with Russia, that is now expanding to a remarkable extent. We have taken major diplomatic leaps with Russia. Do you believe are reasons for US to take Pakistan a bit more negatively?
Again, I think, and I say this less as Pakistan's ambassador and more as a student of international relations and as a student of diplomacy. I think the attempts to resurrect the ghosts of civil war, of the Cold War, I think are not going to be successful. Simply because today the world is a very different place from what it was back during the Cold War era. We are much more integrated, and there is much greater interdependence between states. Just to give you one example, because I think one of the most salient characteristic of the Cold War was for the Warsaw Pact countries and the NATO alliance to exist in silos, and those silos were not just security silos, they were also economic and investment silos. So you would only trade and invest with your so-called treaty partners and allies. So I think the age of hard alliances is over. Today, if I may, US is the largest trading partner of China.
But Ambassador, I will not agree with you on that, because we see these, not only the Cold War taking place once again, the trade war between US and China is expanding. It is going, in different areas now. And besides, there are now trading partners. We just saw Iran being made an example with all these financial strangulations by United States, and China coming to its rescue with offering $450 billion in terms of investment. China holding its cards closer, United States trying to isolate it as much as possible. Importantly, with this quadrilateral security alliance that they have made called Quad, is also apparently made to content China or to curtail China. So don't you think that the blocs are re-emerging again?
Again, I think in terms of reading the intent, perhaps you are right. At least there is a growing lobby and a growing view in United States that China needs to be countered. But then the question is that you cannot clap with one hand. If United States is the indispensable nation, China also is the irresistible country, particularly for the developing countries. What they bring to the table, and the kind of investment, the kind of trade opportunities that a relationship, and it's not just for Pakistan. Pakistan still is a pretty large country, and we hear a lot about the so-called Chinese debt. But if you look at our overall debt portfolio, China still occupies a kind of a small percentage of our total debt liabilities, and on top of that we have never defaulted. But sometimes we hear a lot of noise about that debt, but there are countries who are perhaps much smaller than Pakistan, who are more dependent on China. And it's not just Pakistan. I think that will be a challenge for many other countries. So if the United States or any other country insists on countries to choose between one or the other, I think they will be putting themselves in a tight corner. They will be putting their friends and partners also in a tight corner. And therefore, these choices will have to be tackled quite carefully. And if you look at Quad more closely and listen to what the Japanese would say, listen to what the Australians would say, you would see that it is framed in a much broader language. It is not exactly like the language which was used in the Indo-Pacific Strategy document that the White House has now released with very, very few redactions. So that tells you that the perception in the United States, and obviously when you hear the Biden administration, I mean, they talk about competing with China, where they must, cooperating with China where they have to, and confronting China if they must. So they are looking at all these three tracks, but I would say that right now, while obviously the battle lines are being drawn, but in my own estimation, it is more an exercise in energizing the US base, in basically mobilizing support for the infrastructure bill, in terms of making investments to basically enable the US system to technologically compete with China. And these are going to be frankly difficult choices for any diplomatic establishment. And in that regard, I think Pakistan will not be the only country, and we will not be alone. We will have to make, and you are right, I mean, coming back to your question, I mean, China and Russia, and this is a point that we make very consistently. And we also hear from the administration, at least to the extent of stated positions, that we are not forcing countries to choose. And we have said it and I have said it publicly here, that we don't want our relationship to be seen. As you said, you know, Afghanistan prism is the dominant prism. We don't want to be seen. While yes, it's an issue that we need to work to resolve, but we don't want our relationship to be seen through the Kabul prism, through the New Delhi prism, or even through the Beijing prism. I think we are a significant country in our own right. We are the 5th largest country. We are a nuclear power. We are an influential country in our region. We are a middle power. And I think our relationship has produced good results in the past, and we are confident that the United States needs us as much for regional peace and security as we need United States. So that is the kind of mutually beneficial standalone relationship that we are working to secure with the United States.
Ambassador, thank you very much for being in our program. It was such a lovely conversation, but since we are short in time, so we'll end it here. Thank you very much for being in our program.
Thank you very much for having me. Likewise, it's a pleasure.